We are still in chapter 6, Mishnah number 6 of Pirkei Avos, of Ethics of the Fathers. These are the 48 ways to wisdom, the 48 ways to acquire the Almighty's Torah. And we're up to way number 39, Umachrio lekaf sechus. Way number 39 is when someone judges others favorably. This is an idea that we've seen in the past, that there's a requirement for us when we see someone behaving in an ambiguous way, and we can interpret it in multiple ways. They're doing the right thing, they're doing the wrong thing. We have a mitzvah, a requirement to judge others favorably. Now, just for clarification, this is only true when it's an ambiguous person doing an ambiguous act. You're not sure how to interpret it. But suppose you have a wicked person. A wicked person, we always assume they're doing wicked things. And even if they're doing something which appears to be righteous, it's leaning towards good, we're actually supposed to judge it unfavorably. Maybe they have some sort of scheme that they're up to. This is some sort of ploy. There's some sort of ulterior benefits. I had a conversation with my friend Al this past week. We were studying Genesis, and we're reading about how Jacob meets his soon-to-be father-in-law Laban. And they have, in the text, it seems like they just meet, and he gives him a hug, and he gives him a kiss, and he speaks to him, and that's all the verse says. And Rashi says, Laban is looking for the money, and he's inspecting him. Where's he hiding the money? Because he wants to steal the money. So my friend Al asked me, wait a minute, where does Rashi get that from the text? The text doesn't say anything about that. They give him a hug, you give him a kiss. So I explained to him that we don't judge the wicked favorably. If the verse is something which is ambiguous, Rashi's training us that the proper way to interpret it is to judge it unfavorably. That's by a wicked person. What about by a righteous person? By a righteous person, even if they're doing something which is not ambiguous, it seems to be wicked, it seems to be a sin, because they're righteous. We give them the benefit of the doubt, and we judge them favorably. And certainly if it's a person who's, we're uncertain about them, they're of uncertain righteousness, and we don't know what they're doing, we can interpret their behavior in one of two ways, we judge them favorably. Now, all the commentaries cite the iconic story in the Talmud. The Talmud in the book of Shabbos, page 127b, tells an amazing story. It begins by saying, Hadan chaveru lekaf sechus. If you judge your friend favorably, and then in heaven you will be judged favorably as well. And it gives the story. There was a laborer who worked for 3 years, and he got paid at the end of the 3 years. So 3 years are up. It's time for him to go home, and he has a very long and expensive bill that is now due. So he comes to the master. It's the day before Yom Kippur. I'm going home. I finished my tenure here. I want to go back to my family. Pay me. So the owner or the boss tells him, I don't have any cash. And the person says, that's okay. You have these vast fields. Just, give me some produce or some fruits, some vegetables, and I'll sell them. No big deal. So he says, well, I don't have that either. And this is crazy because the laborer knows, the vast acreage that the boss has. But he says, oh, okay, no problem. Just give me some property. Yeah, property you have, right? I know that. I've been working on the field. Give me some property. I don't have any property. Well, okay, give me some items. Give me some blankets, some pillows, some textiles. I could sell them. I don't have that either. So he has nothing. So the laborer is a bit dejected, but he just leaves. What else are you supposed to do? He goes home empty-handed, and then at the end of the festival of Sukkot, so it's a couple of weeks later, who shows up at his house? It's the boss. And the boss has 3 laden donkeys full of food and all sorts of goodies, and he has the money. And they have a conversation. He debriefs him. He says, wait a minute, what happened when we had that conversation? When you asked for money and I said, I have no money, what did you think? Well, the laborer responds, I I thought that maybe you used up all your available cash because you found a good deal. There was some sort of opportunity that came up, so you just deployed all your cash towards that opportunity. And then when I said, do you have any animals, any livestock? I said, well, you have nothing. Well, what did you think? Well, maybe you lent it out. And what about property? I said, well, maybe you now gave the property over to someone to work. And when I said I have no fruits, well, maybe it wasn't tithe. And when I said I had no textiles, maybe you dedicated that to the temple. You wanted to give it as a donation. And the boss responds, everything that you said when you judged me favorably in every one of these instances, every single thing that you said, which seemed to be very improbable, where this incredibly rich, the billionaire says, I have no money, I can't pay you back, it all happened as you expected. I actually pledged all my money towards the temple because my son, he wasn't studying properly, and I thought this would be a merit for him. But now I went to the sages, and the sages have annulled that vow. Let me pay you your money, but you judge me favorably. May the Almighty judge you favorably as well. This is the story in the Talmud on the page 127b of the book of Shabbos. Now, we're told in the commentaries that these two people, the boss and the laborer, are none other than Rabbi Eliezer, one of the great sages of the Mishnaic era, and the laborer is none other than Rabbi Akiva, who started off as an ignoramus and became the greatest sage of his era, became a student of Rabbi Eliezer. And this was him before he was a sage, before he started studying. At the age of 40, he started studying. We know the story. He started studying, saw the water dripping in the rock and so on. This was him beforehand. He still had sterling character. He was very righteous as a person. He was just ignorant in matters of scholarship. And I find it interesting that our Mishnah at hand is telling us that when you judge others favorably, that is a means through which you can acquire Torah. And we see a story about Rabbi Akiva, who acquired more Torah than anyone else in his era. And the one characteristic that we find about him that was just outstanding, this one superlative quality that he had, was judging others favorably. And maybe that's not a coincidence. He was the exemplar of judging others favorably. It made sense that he will use this as a means to acquire Torah later on in his story. So that's idea number one of judging favorably. When you see someone doing something or behaving in a certain way, and maybe you can interpret it in multiple different fashions, interpret it in a way that exculpates the person from guilt, they behave properly, you judge them favorably. There's another element that the commentaries tell us about this idea of judging favorably. And that is, suppose you saw someone who behaved in a non-ambiguous fashion. They sinned. It's unambiguous. They behaved improperly. So you may think, well, I'm supposed to judge favorably, but that's only when there is maybe room. You could contort the situation into a way that this implies righteousness. Do that. But what about when there's absolutely no wiggle room? This person sinned. So maybe you can, or maybe you should, judge them in your mind as being guilty, because after all, they sinned. And the answer is that no, even in such an instance, you have to judge them favorably. The first thing you have to say is, well, they behaved improperly, but we know that when someone does an accident, God doesn't treat them like they're a willful, wanton sinner. It was a mistake. And therefore, it's not really a violation, a mutiny against God. Moreover, if you were to judge someone negatively, not favorably, judge them as guilty, you are presuming that they did not repent. What if they sinned? We're not angels. We're humans. We're fallible. What if they sinned? And what if it even wasn't accidental? It was a willful sin. If they repented, any scintilla of that sin has now been cleansed, expunged, removed from the record. And the Talmud tells us in the book of Brachos on page 19a, if you see a Torah scholar who sinned, sinned at night, by daytime, don't consider them a sinner anymore, because perhaps they repented. Perhaps. And the Talmud says, wait a minute, perhaps they repented? How could you suspect the Torah scholar of not repenting? So the Talmud amends it. No, not perhaps they repented, but definitely they repented, and therefore there's nothing left over of that sin. Therefore, you should not judge them even just the next day. You see the sin at night, don't judge them as guilty the next day because they definitely repented. Now, this idea of judging favorably, it's a very important and valuable quality. We always talk about this when it comes to the season of repentance. Rosh Hashanah, the times of judgment, Yom Kippur, days of awe. Part of the toolkit that we try to incorporate within ourselves is judging others favorably. Like the Talmud says, if you judge others favorably, God will judge you favorably. If you forgive others, God will forgive you. If you forego the mistreatment that others did to you, God will forego, so to speak, the misdeeds that you did to him. If you are merciful towards others, God will be merciful towards you. That's the way the Almighty works. Tit for tat. The way you treat others is the way you yourself are treated. The way you judge others is the way that you are judged by God. It's a famous idea from the Baal Shem Tov. How is a person judged? They are the judge for their own trial. But they don't realize that they're on trial. The famous example of this is David and Nathan the prophet. In the aftermath of the Bathsheba episode, the prophet comes to rebuke David, but he uses this indirect method. He doesn't say, well, look what you did. You're a terrible sinner. He says, well, imagine there's this woman and she has this one sheep and someone comes and grabs it. What should we do to this person? And he's very harsh. David is very harsh as a judge for that person. And then Nathan, the prophet, says, you're the person. You're the person we're talking about. Because this is exactly what you did. Ata ish, you are the man. Says the Baal Shem Tov, this is always how a person's judged. In heaven, you're going to be appointed as a judge. They'll give you a fancy wig and a nice gown and a gavel, and you're judging. And every person that you judge, it's going to be a version, a variety of something that you yourself did. And if you train yourself to judge others favorably, you're actually judging yourself favorably. Because each case where you're the judge is a case that is similar to something that you did. And that's an incredible benefit of judging favorably. There's another massive benefit for judging others favorably. Again, we're not angels. We're fallible humans. And we have a Yetzer Hara that's very fierce and very powerful and very potent. And there's people around us. And everyone's the same in that they're all caught up in a war. And they all have these competing identities, the body, the soul, our angel and our beast duking it out for supremacy. And we're surrounded by people. But what kind of people are we surrounded with? Are we around righteous people or wicked people? Good people or bad people? It kind of depends. If you train yourself to judge others favorably, everyone you see, you judge them favorably. So that person's righteous and that person's righteous and that person's righteous. Everyone's righteous. If you judge others negatively as guilty, guess what? You're surrounded by wicked people. It's the same people, but you're able to always find the guilt in everything they do. So you're just always surrounded by guilty, wicked people. And here's the idea. A person is going to be very much influenced by their surroundings, by the people that they encounter, by the people that they interact with. What kind of people are you always interacting with? It depends on how you judge them. You judge them favorably, so you're always surrounded by righteous people, and therefore you're influenced by righteous people, and you yourself become more righteous. Because after all, these are the people that you are in constant company with. If you judge them negatively, then in your mind, from your perspective, they are wicked, and you're surrounded by wicked people, and that will also influence you to become more wicked. So simply judging others favorably elevates the class of people that you are in contact with, that you are surrounded by, and that will bleed over, that will influence in how you behave and how righteous you become. Now, why would this lead a person to receive more Torah? This is a way to wisdom. This is a means to acquire Torah. So the first thing we say is that, well, we have a precedent. Rabbi Akiva, he was the greatest sage of his era, and the one quality that we know about him that he had, this bedrock, keystone quality, is that of judging others favorably. But more specifically, we are making a request from the Almighty. We want to be a receptacle, a vessel of your Torah. Are we worthy of that? Are we a worthy recipient to harbor the Almighty's holy Torah? Are we righteous? It depends. If we judge others favorably, God judges us favorably. So simply judging others favorably, God says, okay, well, look at this person, look how righteous they are. Let me dole out to them lots and lots of Torah. After all, they're worthy, they're righteous, they're just. Again, the Talmud says it clearly. You judge others favorably, God will judge you favorably. What are we asking for? We're asking for Torah. Are we worthy? It depends. Does God judge us favorably or not? And what determines that? How we judge others. So it makes a lot of sense now why this will be a way to acquire Torah. But maybe there's another idea. All the way back in chapter 1 of Pirkei Avos, we studied this until like 2017, a long time ago. Chapter 1, Mishnah number 6 of Pirkei Avos, of Ethics of the Fathers. We're now in chapter 6. So this is all the way, chapter 1. The great sages of the Zugos era, they're each giving their lessons, their aphorisms. And Yehoshua ben Prachia, one of the sages of that era, he says 3 things. Asay lecha rav, make for yourself a rav, a teacher. Assign for yourself a teacher. Ukinei lecha chaver, and acquire for yourself a friend, a colleague, a peer. And he ends off, veheve dan as kol ha'adam kaf schus, and judge every person favorably. And the continuity doesn't really flow, like, appoint yourself a teacher. Okay, I get that. That's how you have a teacher, to teach your Torah. And have a friend. That's how you have a colleague. Someone that helps you grow. But what does it to do with judging others favorably? It seems like that's a nice quality to have. It's a nice attribute. It's a nice character trait to develop. It doesn't seem to be connected with having a teacher, having a friend. So maybe this is the idea. You want to have a teacher. I have disturbing news for you. Your teacher is no angel. They're a fallible human. And the verse says, Ein tzadik ba'aretz, asher ya'aseh tov v'lo yechta. There's no righteous person in the world that does good and does not sin. Bad news. Your rabbi, your Rav, is a sinner. And your friend, also a sinner. So you need to have a teacher, or else you're doomed. You need to have good friends, or else you're doomed. But how can you have a teacher? How can you have a friend? They're all sinners. So if you don't judge others favorably, you can't select a teacher. You can't select a friend. So a prerequisite for having a Seilach Harav, having a Rav, having a rabbi, a teacher, and acquiring your friend, is to accept the fact that, or is to adopt the quality of judging others favorably. And of course, having a teacher, it's indispensable towards advancing your studies. And having a good friend who can help you grow is indispensable towards advancing your studies. But only if you accept or you adopt this quality of viewing others in the positive light, only then is it possible to have a good friend and a good teacher. And thus another way that judging favorably, way number 39, leads us to Torah, because that allows us, that facilitates for us to have a friend and to have a rabbi. So that's way number 39, judging others favorably.